Dr. Chakravarti, Mr. Sambamurthy, member of the Governing Council, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and the media. It's really a great pleasure to be here at the IDRBT speaking on the topic of affordable technologies for inclusive growth. I think Dr. Chakravarti made a very important point that the main value of technology in inclusive growth is the fact that by lowering transaction costs, you essentially make it affordable for the people and profitable or meaningful for the business to operate. To give an example, if we were just discussing in the afternoon about what is the average value of an ATM transaction, the average value of an ATM transaction today in India is 3,000 rupees. But if we were to offer micro payments at the level of the village, then the average transaction value will drop to 50 rupees. And therefore, when your technology infrastructure is optimized to deliver average transaction of 3,000 rupees, when you deliver at 50 rupees, you'll have many more transactions, but you deliver them at a much lower cost. And unless you can do that, you can't deliver that particular service to the customer and in turn make a profit or make a gain. So clearly, technology essentially, because it has these kind of game-changing abilities, fundamentally allows you to change the paradigm or change the way that you deliver services. Now, financial inclusive growth is a big word. Inclusive growth can mean many things, and it's I don't want to go all over the place talking about what is inclusive growth. I would like to stick to the issue of financial inclusion in inclusive growth, because as again Dr. Chakravarti said, financial inclusion or allowing the poor to participate in the financial economy is a very important part of inclusive growth. In fact, it's probably one of the key platforms that we need for inclusive growth. So I will limit my talk in the next 45 minutes or so to the issue of financial inclusion. Now, financial inclusion itself is again a very big word, because financial inclusion means many things to many people. To some people it means banking services, to some other people it means offering insurance products. A third person may say, unless you offer a pension product, you can't have financial inclusion. A fourth person may talk about something else. And therefore, again, the phrase financial inclusion also has a lot of meaning. So I will really focus even more on a sub-dimension of financial inclusion, which is the payments part of financial inclusion, which is how do you give and take money from people. And as I'll explain to you, that's not a trivial problem, and that actually is the root of the exclusion that we do of our poor from our financial services. Now, it's appropriate that the IDRBT is the place I discuss this, because I have been involved with the banking sector in my previous avatar for the last 20 years and been involved with the fundamental core banking system design for the last 20 years. And the IDRBT has played a very important role in banking in general and specifically in the payments architecture. I think one of the big things we have done in India in the last several years is really reforming and the electronification of our payments architecture. I think developments like the RTGS and the NEFT and ECS all have shown how we have taken essentially a paper-based payment and settlement system into an electronic world. And that's really a large part of the credit is right here at IDRBT, where they run a lot of these applications that are required by all the banks. But having said that, we have sorted out the problem of what you can call as bulk payments. Where we are still lagging behind is in the issue of retail payments. In other words, retail payments are the transactions that we do at each given point, and it's about the money that we exchange. And that is really where we have to do a lot of things, because even today, 90% plus of our retail payments are cash-based. And unless we can take those payments to an electronic model, we'll not be able to lower transaction costs to an extent where the poor can participate in the economy. And therefore, the electronification of retail payments, which is to increase the number of electronic transactions in the system and reducing the number of paper-based transactions at the retail level, is the single biggest, I would think, challenge of getting people onto the system. And therefore, we really have to think about how to solve the challenge of retail payments where individuals and their getting access to money is simplified. Now, you may say this is a very simple problem, and it seems very simple. But the reality is that we have not solved this problem for the large majority of the population of this country. The total number of ATMs in this country is less than 40,000. It's approximately 38,000. Most of it is in urban and essentially high population areas. The total number of point of sales in this country is about 500,000. Again, it's biased towards urban and concentrated populations. But the vast majority of our villages do not have any access to any way to withdraw money or deposit money very easily. And it is those people whom we have to touch to be able to give them these kind of services. I just thought I will take 7 or 8 examples of the real world challenges that the poor face. Let's assume that you are an NREGA worker today. Now, sometime back, we decided in the NREGA system that the NREGA worker must deposit the money, the worker's wages must be deposited either in a bank account or a post office account. And we have opened about 65 million accounts, about 30 million in the banks and 35 million in the post office. And in the banking system, these are called as no-frills accounts. But these accounts are in the bank branches, which are located very far away from the villages where these people work and live. And therefore, if you're an NREGA worker, you work for 2 weeks, you get 100 rupees a day, you get 1,000 rupees for the 2 weeks, you have to take one more day, travel somewhere 20, 30 kilometers to the branch, stand in the queue, withdraw your money and come back the same day. In other words, you spend an entire day just to withdraw the money that you are entitled to. And that's what it means, because that person does not have easy access to the withdrawal of money in his own village. That's an example of an NREGA worker. Similarly, there is a program of government as part of the National Rural Health Mission called the Janani Suraksha Yojana, where pregnant women are entitled to a certain cash payment if they come in for antenatal care and come in for institutional delivery. And in many states, it's about 1,400 rupees in so-called high focus states and 700 rupees in other states. And states like Tamil Nadu have their own program where they're giving much more money to pregnant women to come. But how do you give the money when they come? Because again, you have to figure out how do we give them the money. They get a bearer's check or they get cash or something like that. So everyone has their own method of paying people. If you give it in a bank account, then you have to travel to the bank to get the money. If you give it as a check, you have to cash the check somewhere. If you give it as cash, that creates rent-seeking opportunities. If you give it to the post office will deliver cash over time. So every kind of payment system that we have to deliver money to the poor has some limitations that make their life extremely difficult. A third example is a remittance. If you are a person, say, working in Mumbai or in Delhi, and you want to remit money to your wife in a village in Bihar, how do you do it? There's no way to do it. You either have to use the post office, or you have to have some intermediary who goes to the nearest branch, withdraws the money, walks back to the village, takes his commission, and then gives the money to your wife. So when you start looking at all these fundamental things, you find that for the poor who are far away from any point of payment of financial transaction, the amount of overhead which we put on the person, either in terms of travel, in terms of inconvenience, in terms of harassment, is very, very high compared to what you and I face when we go to a bank ATM to withdraw money. So in other words, making the payments possible to the poor at the point where they live is a very important part of financial inclusion, and that's something which we have to look at. Now, as Dr. Chakravarti was saying, we seem to have reached a point of critical mass where we now have the moving parts to actually put together to create a platform for payments and financial inclusion that can reach out in an affordable way to all the people. And the reason we have reached this point is actually because of the investment we have done in the last 20 years in a variety of platforms. Now, what do I mean when I use the word platform? A platform is nothing but an ecosystem that you create where everybody on the ecosystem is using a common way of doing things. And